What is up, everybody? Hope you're doing well. In today's video, we will talk about CCP, or rather somebody else will talk about CCP today. I've been wanting to do this for a while now, and as you probably know, I'm obviously a big fan of CCP, but I focus more on the leather pieces, right? Because leather work is obviously where my roots are, so I'm always excited about different leather treatments and stuff. So I tend to focus more on the leather CCP pieces, but obviously a big focus for CCP is tailoring, right? And to be honest, I don't feel really qualified to talk about tailoring. So my thought was, okay, why not let somebody else who is really deep into tailoring and has big knowledge base and good taste, in my opinion, why not let somebody else do the talking on tailoring? So today, JCASS will talk about tailoring. I've been following this guy for a while now, and I can highly recommend you check out his Instagram. It's just the first link below the like button. And yeah, it's basically, he loves talking about fashion, obviously, a lot of CCP, lots of tailoring, and he's very knowledgeable, and the way he is able to articulate himself is just, man, if I could do it this way, I think my channel would be 10 times better. But yeah, definitely check out his Instagram. And yeah, today he's talking about a jacket, right? A blazer, beautiful piece. So I'll hand it over straight to you. Justin, JCASS style, let's go.
Hey David, thank you so much for inviting me onto your channel. For those of you who don't know me, I'm JCASS, and today I'm here to talk to you about a very special jacket made by the one and only Carol Christian Poell. Many of you may already be familiar with the more popular CCP items, and you may have already seen them on David's channel. Those would be, your drip sneakers, your leather jackets, your vest bags, and of course our favorite, the tornado boots. And while these are certainly great pieces in their own right, and they have a lot to explore within the leather work and the processing of those items, I think it's very important to kind of remember that Carol himself is very rooted within tailoring and its traditions. From a very early age, about his mid-teens, Carol was already working with tailored garments and learning about how these things were made, and kind of learning at a very micro level exactly how to best construct them, and kind of dedicated his life and his education in some parts to making these garments, these tailored garments, as best as he possibly could. He has this very deep understanding of tailoring and its traditions. He chooses to challenge and subvert these kind of traditions for his own sort of commentary on clothing and what it can and should be, and what's kind of silly about it in some cases. And I think that this jacket that I have with me today is a wonderful example of all that. So this jacket in particular is from the spring 2007 collection, Paranoid. You may have already seen some photos from the lookbooks on Instagram archive pages. Shout out Solomon. These photos were taken in this kind of dingy, white, poorly constructed room with these tiles that are kind of cracking and cragging up from the ground, and this kind of eerie fire escape that's kind of lifting up in the middle of the room. Some notable pieces from this collection that are featured in the lookbook include perforated leather masks, necklaces featuring this big weight dangling from them, kind of oddly cut trousers where the legs are cut in, sometimes a dramatic U shape, sometimes in almost look like someone's already walking in motion, and many others. But today what we want to focus on is this jacket. On the garment tag itself, this is known as the GM2190LS Sniff 10. Rolls off the tongue very nicely, but officially this is called the classic lined 2-button jacket. Almost doesn't even tell the full story, but kind of within the community, this is known as the hidden button jacket, which we'll get into in just a moment. Now let's decode the product name a little bit. GM is what is kind of identifying it as a tailored jacket. 2190LS is the specific model that we're looking at. Usually the number is kind of the general form, and then sometimes they tack on letters such as LS as a modifier. There also exists a TS version of this, which is a taped seam version. Sniff is the fabric that's actually being used, the material, and then 10 at the end is finally the color of the garment. Sniff is a 100% cotton fabric, and in my opinion, it's kind of a mid-weight cotton. It's not super heavy and structured and kind of no give to it, and it's also not very lightweight and flimsy and kind of just crumpling around. It's got some inherent, heft to it, but it's not overbearing. Likely wouldn't be very uncomfortable to wear in the warmer months of the year. And it also kind of most significantly features what is kind of called the rain pattern in the community. It's this kind of streaking of white against the black of the cotton, and it creates this effect that almost looks like in animation when they want to make it look like it's raining. They create kind of this overlay of white streaks on the screen, and it's very similar to what the actual garment looks like up close. It's kind of streaking and sporadic and uneven in it, but it kind of creates this wonderful variation and brings out a kind of inherent texture in the fabric. Taking a look at the general form of the jacket, you're gonna see that's very familiar if you're acquainted with Carol's more recent tailoring. The proportions themselves are cut very long, very slender, and kind of without regard to, a normal person actually putting on the jacket. The sleeves themselves are cut super long, and they end up kind of hitting around the mid-knuckle, but Carol has this beautiful way of integrating this French cuff into his jacket that you'll see all over the place in his more recent tailoring. But what it does is it creates this kind of blink and you'll miss it flaring to the sleeve that allows it to kind of encompass the hand without kind of crumbling and looking very sloppy. Of course, there's the notch lapels. This is very common in suiting and probably the go-to standard. Not that Carol doesn't work with other kind of lapel styles, but this is kind of the standard that he works with, and it's also, again, keeping in with the slender proportions. The lapels are a little more on the trim side. As well, there is a beautiful structure to the shoulder here. Of course, if you're at all familiar with anything related to Carol's tailoring, it is the inherent structure that's built into the garment, and it's wonderfully on display here. There's a beautiful roll to the shoulder itself, and it's kind of a nod possibly to the tailoring of Cifanelli, who kind of popularized the pagoda style shoulder. There are certain jackets of Carol's that kind of use this to a very extreme extent where they very literally lift up off the shoulder, but here it's kind of a tasteful roll. If we're talking about normal suiting, this is perhaps maybe a little bit more Roman shoulder than Cifanelli, just by Carol standards, of course. And now we'll move on to what's probably my favorite detail of this jacket, and that would be its buttoning configuration. And I find that this detail is a little bit more in line with the older Carol sensibility and is even a little bit silly. In menswear, there's typically 3 main buttoning configurations that you see in single-breasted suits. That would be 1-button, 2-button, and 3-button jackets. 1-button jackets are almost exclusive to formal wear and tuxedo jackets. 2-button jackets are what are going to be the most commonly seen suit jackets. The way that this system works is that the top button is your functioning button, and this is the one that you button up when you're standing up, take it off when you're sitting down. But that bottom button is never supposed to be used. It's kind of a faux pas, if you will. And this goes back to some fat king, maybe 100 or so years ago. And then there's 3-button jackets where you still button that second button, so that middle button is meant to be buttoned. And then that top one, you can take it or leave it, but that bottom button is still never used. And this is a less common today. It's also a little bit more casual. This jacket here is kind of a wonderful combination of all 3 of these styles. As we talked about in its name, it is a 2-button jacket, so functionally there are 2 buttons that are there and that you can button and can use, but the way that it's set up is kind of a nod to a very odd 3-button configuration called a 3-roll 2. This is where the 3rd button, the topmost button, is actually found in the roll of the lapel. It's kind of hidden away, and it's kind of, it's there, and it's kind of just for yourself, but you're not really meant to use this button. You're supposed to just button it like it's a 2-button jacket. Here, that hidden button is actually hidden within the lapel roll of the jacket, and it's cut in such a way that it almost is still where it should be for a typical 2-button jacket, but that bottom button is the one that you're really meant to use because it's actually exposed and usable. So it's this kind of funny thing where functionally it's really only a 1-button jacket. Literally it's a 2-button jacket, but it's kind of also a nod to a funky 3-button jacket. And by buttoning it, you're also committing the ultimate menswear faux pas of using your bottom button. Tailoring in menswear is really my first love in fashion and kind of the way I got into it. And so Carol's tailoring kind of speaks to me very directly with all the details and nuance that he uses and kind of the nods to that tradition of menswear and kind of ways that he chooses to ignore that or challenge it even. I find that these suits are created in such a way that they are on par with the best of the best of the best. And even within that, he's still finding ways to change the narrative and kind of push forward on what is included in a suit and how it should function as it's a garment in and of itself. And it's really what excites me the most about his work. Thank you so much, David, for having me on. And I'm so glad that you guys were so welcoming to listen to me ramble a little bit here.
Thank you very much, JCASS. Beautiful piece, beautifully explained. Let me know down in the comments, guys. What do you think about the jacket? Should we put JCASS on the video more often? I believe we should. So yeah, thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next week. Cheers.